Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Whoops, I almost forgot to turn my mic on. That's what that pause was. Good to be back. And boy, as usual, an awful lot on our plates. Where to start? Just start with a date, just because that's easy. July 31. Susan's birthday. Got to remember to call her after this. And wow. Where do I want to start? Yo, there's so much. Hey, before I get into any of it, I once was out of the country during a Summer Olympics. I was in England. It was 1992, and I watched the British television of the Olympics, and it was so different than what I was used to seeing here. For one thing, they focused on a lot of different sports that you never see focused on here in America's coverage. And I'm sure it makes sense for every country that's covering it to focus on sports that their team is dominant in or good at or even competing in. But the Brits seem to just show all kinds of stuff, and I became fascinated with learning about things I did not know. Now, it's one of the negatives of how America covers the games, as they're called, because there are so many games, and it is just a little bitty sliver of the games that you, watching NBC's coverage, really see. So the one thing I do want to point out, and I don't know if they've covered it at all, because I've seen some videos, is the equestrian event dressage. If you can watch some of these horses dance, they are dancing to music. Their legs are doing things that are not normal for a horse's gait. It is just fascinating to watch. Just saying, if you get a minute. Dressage. There's a lot of others, but that's one that this year I wish that they were. I mean, I haven't seen any of the coverage. I wish they would introduce to American audiences. Okay, that's starting easy. Kari Lake is going to be running for the U.S. Senate in Arizona against Ruben Gallego. I'm not sure how he pronounces it. And that's a huge race in Arizona. And as was pointed out earlier in regard to those of us who see Mike Kelly as such a great vice presidential candidate, these Senate seats in Arizona are golden and not easy to procure in what is still a pretty dang red state. So I don't know. It's got me a little cooler on, not that of course that matters at all, cooler on choosing Kelly. You know who I've never acknowledged and want to, especially because he apparently is in the running and he's the most dark horse in the Veep stakes. is the governor of Minnesota. And I want to acknowledge that yesterday, when it was brought up that the new word employed against Trump and his cohort is weird. They're just weird. And when I first heard it, I thought, yeah, that's not right. They're much more than weird. They're dangerous. They're this, they're that. But apparently, weird is working, maybe better than the more aggressive, uh, yet truthful adjectives like dangerous and authoritarian and fascist and undemocratic. Uh, and I think it was pointed out yesterday. Was it our caller Roger who said, weird allows somebody not to get defensive about the politics of it. It allows them to react to the very human behavior that is evident by Trump, and it's weird. So it's Governor Walz of Minnesota who first conjured that. And he's the one who started calling Trump weird. And Harris picked up on it. And now everybody, that's the messaging now. Weird, weird. So it works. And this Walz is on her list. Minnesota is not generally considered a swing state. It's gotten, I don't know, I don't think it's a swing state. But he's an interesting guy, and I just want to flesh him out a little bit before we find out who's going to be the choice. He was he got into politics relatively late in his life. He was a social studies teacher for 20 years. He coached the high school football team. And then he, I don't know, decided to run, and he ran for Congress and was elected, I think knocked off a Republican held seat in a relatively rural area, which is pretty impressive in this day and age. So he knocked off a long-serving Republican congressman coming out of nowhere, this guy, the social studies teacher. And it was pretty much a red meat kind of rural district. He won. And then he won again and again. So he served, I guess, 3 terms in Congress, and then he ran for governor and won. And it's pointed out that this guy, how sometimes when the effete and elitist Democratic candidates try to make themselves palatable to regular Americans, how they all of a sudden are seen hunting or fishing or something like that, and it always looks a little odd. Senator Heidi Heitkamp, former, I guess, North Dakota, knows this guy well, and she said, now here's a guy who actually knows how to fish. This is a guy who actually knows how to hunt. This is a guy who served our country in the National Guard and, in fact, served for 24 years, ascending to the rank of Command Sergeant Major. Since he's been governor, and I believe this is his first term, man, he has instituted so many progressive kinds of programs, such as He, in his term, the Democrats have enshrined, I'm quoting here from the article, enshrined a right to abortion under state law, legalized recreational marijuana, funded free meals at schools across the state, required employers to offer paid medical and family leave, expanded background checks for gun purchases, and established a goal to transition to carbon-free electricity grid by 2040. This is a interesting guy. Just wanting to put him on your radar if he's not. And as he says, his sense of what to do with power is this. It's what he's doing. He says, Minnesota is showing the country you don't win elections to bank political capital. You win elections to burn political capital and improve lives. So that's a good one, just saying. Milton, as usual, is a fount of information. Milton says all of the equestrian events are covered live and are available in their entirety. Oh, on Peacock. Do I have Peacock? Peacock has full coverage of most events available in real time and on demand. That's good to know. Milton, thank you. So, I mean, if you have Peacock, check these other sports out. They're some of them just fascinating. And you're watching the best in the world because it's the Olympics. And Bree, God bless you, Bree, writing again to say, please subscribe to the show. We're so close to hitting that all important mark of 1,000 of you who have done it. If you haven't, just go to YouTube, get to my show, and subscribe. It doesn't cost anything. It's just a moment of your time if you haven't done it. I haven't done it. Come to think of it. Can you subscribe to your own show? I suppose you could. Okay, I'll make a point of it. Okay, so let's just go back to the Veep stakes just a little bit, a few more things. I'm sorry. Margaret says they had lots of horse jumping at Versailles yesterday. All right, so I stand corrected. But you gotta watch the dressage. The horses doing this unbelievable stuff to music right on the beat. They're dancing and looking so cool. It's just blew me away. Anyway, okay, so it turns out Harris has said that she is going to, on Tuesday, which is essentially a week away, will be campaigning in Philadelphia with her vice presidential pick. Now, I don't know. I saw that and I thought, Philly? Shapiro's hometown? It seems that would make it seem as if Shapiro's going to be your pick. And yet, the campaign has said not to draw any conclusions about where the race with her vice presidential choice is starting out. So, who knows? I don't know. But man, Tuesday, I think it's really interesting. Who knows? This, by the way, from the Atlantic today, an interesting article. an unhappy article, if you ask me. I'll read just a part. A politician designed in a lab to help Democrats win pivotal Rust Belt swing states would probably look a lot like Josh Shapiro. And then they go on to talk about how in 2016, when Trump won Pennsylvania, shame on us. When Donald Trump won Pennsylvania, Shapiro, on that same ballot running for Attorney General of the state, won by nearly 3%. Trump just squeaked by here, under 1%. So Shapiro outperformed the winning Republican in 16. 4 years later, when Joe Biden won Pennsylvania by 1 point, Shapiro won re-election by more than 4. He's always running ahead of the national candidate, Republican or Democrat. And then in 2022, he took the governorship by a whopping 15%. Now, remember, he was running against election-denying Christian nationalist lunatic whose name escapes me. His favorability rating right now in this swing state is 61%. Kamala Harris's right now in the state is 49%. 61%, which is a huge favorability rating, which shows that a lot of Republicans and independents are saying, yeah, he's good. I guess John King on CNN happened to mention that one of the negatives about him was he's Jewish, and that got a lot of blowback, as if John King was then an anti-Semite for saying it. But I've said it, and I'm a Jew, and I assure you I'm not an anti-Semite. This article says events have borne out John King's concern, because Shapiro is not just Jewish, he's openly Jewish. One of the most visibly Jewish elected officials in the country. He keeps kosher. That's big. He's talked about how important it is to have weekly Shabbat dinner, Friday night dinner with his family. The only race, by the way, this guy has ever lost, Shapiro, is when he ran to be student body president at his Jewish day school. But there's a group gunning for him. A group on supposedly our side of the political divide. And here's what I want to tell you. Shapiro is the only one of the vice presidential contenders who is being subjected to an organized campaign to scuttle his prospective choice. And it's been put together by leftist congressional staffers and members of Democratic Socialists of America. Now, we can assume that those folks are going to vote for the Democrats in the race. I don't know. But right now, they are trying mightily to keep him off the ballot. And they say they're going after him because of his support for Israel. And they even have a site, no genocidejosh.com. Now, here's what's interesting about this. Every other possible vice presidential choice for Harris has essentially the same point of view on Israel and on the war as does Shapiro. The only thing that sets him aside from that group is he's the only Jew. He has called Netanyahu one of the worst leaders of all time. He is, but this plays in. Here's what I want to say. The left, they have embraced just full bore. This is anti-Semitic. He's no different in his position than Kelly, than Walz when it comes to Gaza. No, they don't want him because he's a Jew, and they fear that somehow, because he's a Jew, he's going to tip things. So they play right into, I don't know. It's just mind blowing to me. He has called for a two-state solution. He is openly against the hard right government there. I don't know. So there you have it. Just want to say there are no other websites such as genocidejosh.com, and that's put there that's put there by lefties. They don't have a killerkelly.com. They don't have a warcrimeswalls.com. No. Mind-blowing. And I want to point it out. Okay, so I did. Let's see, what else we got? I wanted to introduce you to Walz if you hadn't been. I wanted to let you know about, Tuesdsay and Philly and Shapiro. Now he's being targeted by the Democratic Socialists of America. Is Inamorado still a card-carrying member? I hope not. Is, for that matter, Summer Lee still a card-carrying member? I don't know. I want to note in my obituary today, this is not a fun obituary. I like fun ones, but this one is not. This is Lieutenant William Calley, Jr. I wouldn't even bring it up since you're a smart audience, you know your history, and I'm assuming you know all about him. But man, even I thought I knew everything, but oh, what I forgot. So I just want to drop back through this. It was 56 years ago. And we killed Calley and his crew, mass murdered hundreds of women, children, men, old people with automatic weapons, grenades, bayonets. They raped girls and women. They mutilated bodies. They even killed the livestock and they burned the village to the ground. My Lai, the My Lai Massacre. That's why I bridle when people, see somebody in a uniform and they immediately assume they're a hero. Thank you for your service. Would you thank any of these people for their service? By the way, it wasn't a fight. There was no resistance. The villagers did not resist when the Americans came calling. The final death toll was 504 people. Can you imagine? Ages from 1 to 82. Lieutenant Calley was the only person who took part in this war crime and atrocity, unbelievable atrocity, who was ever convicted. And that seems like another criminal act. In fact, in between the time he and his guys mowed all those folks down, he was promoted to first lieutenant and awarded a Bronze Star with oak leaf cluster and a Purple Heart and all this stuff, while the upper folks in command were busily covering it all up. His superiors initially said it was a successful search and destroy mission. It took over a year and a half after this massacre. It took a journalist, Seymour Hersh, who won a Pulitzer Prize for his investigation. It took the persistent efforts of a few of the soldiers who were there for this story to come out. He was charged with the mass murder of civilians in 1969. He was one of 25 people who were initially charged, including his commander. There were 2 generals who were charged initially, 10 other officers, some of the enlisted men who took part. 6 of the guys were court-martialed, but everyone was acquitted or charges were dropped, and only Calley was found guilty. His trial had the kind of testimony that would make you gag. Testimony that sounded like something the Nazis would do when they were rounding up Jews. Some of the eyewitnesses, some of the soldiers, said that they herded, sobbing, cowering men, women, and children into ditches and shot them in bunches. He went to trial in 69, and in 71, it took 2 years, year and a half, he was convicted of the premeditated murder of 22, not less than 22, they said. And he was sentenced to life in prison. But see, here's where the story then gets even more appalling. Days after he was sentenced, President Nixon said, "You don't have to report to prison. You can stay in your apartment while you appeal." And the appeals, oh my God, they went on and on and on. The commanding general reduced his life sentence to 20 years. The Secretary of the Army then jumped in and cut the 20 years to 10. And he told Callie, if you serve it, with no trouble, we'll let you out after just 3 years. And then in 74, a federal judge in Georgia just overturned the entire conviction. The Army appealed. Callie was confined to his barracks at Fort Leavenworth for 3 months. He was then released on bail and never, ever returned to custody. Wow. Wow. I suppose that's the kind of history that Ron DeSantis and the Republicans would say, you cannot teach that in schools, not in public schools. I mean, this guy was a loser from day one. He had a record as a loser when the Army put him in position to command that atrocity. He was always really bad in school. He was caught cheating. He had to repeat the 7th grade. He tried junior college. He quit after a semester with grades in the toilet. He was a restaurant dishwasher. He became a switchman for the Florida East Coast Railroad, and then he got arrested on charges of allowing one of his trains to block 5 downtown intersections in Fort Lauderdale for during rush hour. I mean, it just total inability to do the job. So he moved west, and then his car broke down in Albuquerque, and he didn't know what the hell to do, so he enlisted. He applied for officers' candidate school, and here's where the Army starts becoming derelict and guilty in the ascension of this loser. Despite his low aptitude test scores, despite the fact that the tests found him lacking in command presence, they took him in. He was going to be an officer because they needed platoon leaders. There was a war to be fought and massacres to be attended to. Wow. William Calley. There should have been many more found guilty. Many more. It was unfair to dump it all on this pathetic loser. He didn't have the smarts, the personality, the will to be. They put him in a job he couldn't do. Okie doke. Mary saying Kamala just announced she's making a campaign stop on Tuesday with her VP pick in Philly. I know. It makes you think. I mean, it would be a little odd if she shows up there with, let's say Buttigieg, and then Shapiro's just standing there. Well, I don't know. No, I mean, any of these guys will be getting behind the ticket. There's no doubt of that. Okay, so let's see. I have a little something here for you. I came upon this just horrifying. There's been a number of horrifying pieces since Trump's, you won't have to vote again thing in front of the Christians. And then somebody compiled all of the, before he gets out there to speak, Trump, there's always a prayer. Did you know that? Yeah, there's a prayer said by some minister. And someone, I forget where I read it, compiled all the prayers that have preceded Trump's coming onto the stage. And oh my God, they are chilling. And it's almost all evangelicals that are doing these prayers. So I saw an article recently that says, what the hell is an evangelical now? They think God has anointed. If they think God has anointed this, I'm sorry, I've just run out of, okay, this weird guy as his standard bearer, then you've lost touch with the teachings of Jesus, quite clearly. So what does it mean to be an evangelical? Because people do, when asked, what are you belong to a religion, and they'll say, I'm an evangelical. Well, get this, here's some interesting, just a factoid or two. Evangelicals, the very meaning of what evangelical is, has changed. Because all you have to do is, and I feel sorry for the true evangelicals, but they've lost. Just like I feel sorry for a lot of Christians now, because the very name of your religion is being sullied. And stop. Okay, so here's this guy who knows of what he writes. He's a Christian. He says the label evangelical is not really a theological marker anymore. It's not a marker of professing belief in certain Christian doctrines, or it doesn't even mean you belong to, let's say, an evangelical church. Those who study this stuff say that if you look at the numbers from like last year, the year before, I mean, when you think of evangelicals, you think like really religious. I mean, they're steeped in religion, right? No, wrong. That's what we got to realize. A full quarter of self-described evangelicals attend church less than once a year, meaning not at all. If it's less than one, then they never step foot in a church. They call themselves evangelicals and are never in a church. That's a quarter of them. Fewer than half, about half, say they go to church weekly, maybe. And those who study evangelicalism say that it's no longer a religious marker, it is a cultural and political marker. It is, when somebody says they're an evangelical, it's evangelicalism without the religion part. It's evangelicalism with the culture war part and the white nationalist part and the cultish part and the incredible. It's just incredible. These folks are scary. I want to talk to you about some other scary folks. And these scary folks are in a position to do some serious damage. We've talked a bit about the fact that, election deniers have sought and have won positions all over the country in which they are in a position to impact the election before and after the votes have been counted. Because these are folks who are in positions to say, I believe there's been fraud. I cannot, until we do a full investigation, certify the results from my county. There are a whole ton of them. And they're all over. They control some counties in Pennsylvania. More on that later. It was the Rolling Stone, I think, in cahoots with some other investigative journalist, who looked at the online postings of election officials from all over the country, and they found so many who totally believe Trump won the 2020 election. These are people who have shown support for political violence. The posts are full of Christian nationalism and not a little bit of racism and anti-Semitism as well. And what we need to understand is that this belief that in fact Trump was denied re-election by a massive fraud perpetrated by the deep state and the Democrats has actually grown in the last 4 years. And there's a lot of Republican election officials who are already saying they're very skeptical whether or not this will be a fair election as well. Now, the trick they mostly focus on, well, I talked yesterday about how they go out, Republicans and states controlled by Republicans just go out of their way to keep people from registering, to make it difficult to vote, all of that stuff. But they don't stop there, because once the votes have been cast, they're still hard at work. Take this in. Total election denying pro-Trump folks are working as local election officials in at least 16 counties across the 6 battleground states. Let me tell you, just one county's vote being held up and not certified can throw the whole thing into disarray, allowing disinformation to spread. Berks County, Pennsylvania. They have 2 commissioners, and they already in 22 midterm election voted to delay certification of the votes of Burke County voters over concerns about, well, they make them up. We have some undated ballots here. I'm not sure if this doesn't appear to be quite properly done, this mail-in ballot. And do you know that they discarded 16,000 ballots? This is in the midterms. The vast majority of them from Democratic voters. A 3-judge panel eventually backed the decision to throw out the undated ballots. So they got the courts in cahoots with them as well. Lancaster County, folks. Centre County, Luzerne County, Erie. These are all counties in our Commonwealth that have Trumpist election deniers in a position to not certify. Centre and Luzerne counties also have, in this last primary election in April, they held up certification of their vote, and they're both swing counties, Centre and Luzerne. See, certification, stop and think about it. What was the January 6th thing? They were trying to stop the final certification of the vote, giving the win to Joe Biden. Now they're going to try to stop things earlier than that. And if enough of them do, to stymie and gum up the works. So, since January 6th, there have been at least 25 instances of certification refusals in 8 states. Georgia leads the way in numbers of certification refusals since the 2020 election. Meanwhile, the Georgia State Election Board, which now has election deniers on it, has begun crafting a new rule that would allow for county election officials to refuse certification if, quote, a reasonable inquiry can be made. Ha! You can imagine what a reasonable inquiry could conceivably be. Well, I heard that somebody saw. So understand what we're facing. It's not just a matter of we've got to get the vote out. We've got to ensure that the vote gets counted. In 2020, there were 85 lawsuits filed over the election, almost all by Republicans trying this kind of mischief. Now, 3 months before the next election, there are more than 150 lawsuits already in court, most of which are filed by election deniers. I think there's a guy in Erie too. I think I mentioned Erie. Erie's has to be watched. Unbelievable. And here, it should be pointed out that this is where Republicans have always played the long game and have understood that these smaller positions, Democrats show up for maybe Senate and presidents and governors. And then after that, they think, okay, that's it. No. And it's why so many state legislatures are controlled by Republicans and school boards. Democrats have got to understand the bigger picture and have got to learn to play a longer game. So it's fascinating to see Trump trying to back away from Project 2025. I don't know anything about it. And he got him to sort of like, close down, they say, wrap it up, you're finished, right? It's not true. They're totally not, nah. Project 2025 is mostly the brainchild of Kevin Roberts, who is the president of the Heritage Foundation, a right-wing, now Christian nationalist think tank. Those guys, many of whom, these guys are all over Trump's past and heading in, and they trying to, do a blueprint for his future when he becomes president again, Project 2025. But there's so much stuff in there that is mind-boggling that Trump's trying to now disassociate himself from it. And good luck with that. His vice presidential pick, a guy named Vance, has in fact written the foreword to Heritage President Kevin Roberts' book, which is coming out any minute. And it is the book. Where did I read? They've changed the title of the book because it was the publisher, and now since some people are getting queasy at the public reaction to Project 2025, they've tried to tone things down a little bit. But all of that is before J.D. Vance wrote the foreword to the book. And even though Trump says, I have no idea who's behind it, these are his people. They are people that served in his administration. Now, I'm looking here to find the book's title's been changed. There was like the graphics on it had like a lit match sort of burning Washington to the ground or something. All of that has been, prettied up just a little bit. But Vance wrote the foreword, and it ends thusly. When the twilight descends and you hear the wolves, you've got to circle the wagons and load the muskets. Yeah. Well, but they're now denying that they had, we don't, who are those guys? What? Heritage Foundation? Don't know that I've heard of them. And so even though this guy named Paul Dange, you'll see, is now stepping down as the operations director of Project 2025, do not think for a minute that Project 2025 is gone, because it ain't. It is there. Oh yeah, the original title was called Burning Down Washington to Save America, and had a match on the center of its cover. There's no match on the cover now. And it's now called Taking Back Washington, not Burning It Down. So there was something I wanted to talk about that I have failed to talk about, and time is running. What was it? What was it? What was it? Damn it. I mean, there's a number of things that I can't figure it out. Oh, dang it. Okay. So I've done that. Hey, I saw that in the city, just coming back home a little bit here, that there maybe we're going to get like these sensors and cameras or something at intersections to get the people who are barreling through red lights. And I want to say, thank God, bring it on. Unbelievable. I mean, driving now, I remember when I was taught to drive how I was told you have to remember it's not just you on the road, and you can be doing all the right stuff, but somebody else might not be. So you have to always be driving defensively. Be aware of everyone around you. Well, my God, I've been driving for 60 years, and I have never seen the level of drivers who just totally ignore lights. I mean, it started with the yellow ones, right? Everybody now barrels through every yellow light. Well, there's people barreling through it, and they're in fact barreling through red by the time they get to the intersection. But I have flat out seen people go through red lights when I mean, it's been read. They've approached it. It's read, and they barrel through them. It turns out that since 2018 in the city, fatal crashes way outnumber what's happening in terms of homicide. And fatal crashes have gone up in the last 6 years by 71%. And it's because people are, I don't know, what do you think it is? There's this rage, anger, screw everybody else. It's all about me. I don't know. I don't know. But I think you have to be a particular kind of a bad person to not care about the other people sharing a road with you. Just unbelievable, really. Okay, now I've gone over, and I'll try to remember what the hell it was I wanted to talk to you about. But anyway, there you go, and I'll be back tomorrow. See you then, and I look forward to it as soon as I can figure out how to again end the show. Boy, it's amazing how quickly you lose sort of muscle memory or something. I don't know.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.